Hi there. My name is Avijit Day and I'm a technical marketing engineer for Collaboration Technology Group in Cisco. I focus on products like Cisco Meeting Server. I also focus on emerging technologies like Microsoft Teams, Cloud Video Interop, and WebEx Meetings APIs. It was very interesting for me to create this content and I hope you find my content helpful in some way or other. Let's begin. CMS APIs are RESTful, which means there is no active connection. It is a HTTPS request and response model. Prior to CMS 2.9, an external tool was needed to send API requests while configuring. 2.9 release has enabled the API access from the CMS GUI. This is an option under the Configuration tab. This is a screenshot of the new API page under the CMS GUI's Configuration tab. By default, this lists all the APIs in alphabetical order. This is very helpful for the admin as he can see all the available APIs for CMS. Without this, the API guide was needed to know which API and how to use it. If you know which API to use, you can use the filter section to type the API and the search shows the related APIs. This is an example of how the APIs can be used to create a new call bridge. The mandatory parameters will have the red asterisk after the parameter name. This is an example of how a list looks like. In this screenshot, all the three call legs are shown for a meeting. I will talk in detail about what a call leg is in few minutes. This is another example of a co-space creation. The parameters which have preset multiple options are shown as drop-down. Here, as you can see, the default layout parameter has a drop-down, which shows all the screen layout options I talked about before. The first API is space related. Spaces in CMS is called co-spaces. All the APIs listed in this slide are related to CMS spaces. Co-spaces configures the meeting information like primary and secondary URI, the call ID, password, etc. It also defines the default meeting related parameters like default layout, etc. CoSpace accepts the call profiles, call leg profiles, and the call branding profiles. These profiles define some more meeting, participant, and branding related configurations. More of these profiles will be discussed later. Access methods can be configured for every CoSpace. This is not a mandatory configuration. Access methods give the ability to use different URI, call ID, and passcode to join the same CoSpace. Access methods are used to create the host and guest type of meetings. CoSpace users can define the in-meeting permission for a certain user. Permissions to add, delete a member, delete the CoSpace, etc. CoSpace users can also be configured with a call leg profile, which also defines the same permissions but for generic meeting participant and not specific to a user. Diagnostics show the active meeting related info. Messages show the chat messages. This works for WebBridge 2 and not for WebBridge 3 as WebBridge 3 does not support the chat capability. CoSpace bulk parameter set, as the name suggests, creates spaces in bulk. It uses regular expression to create the URI, space name, and call ID pattern. CoSpace bulk sinks are used to execute the created set. It can be used to both create and delete spaces in bulk. Space templates are used by the web app users to create spaces. Space template has the same option what the CoSpace API has. The only difference is Space template uses a regular expression to create the URI pattern. This API is needed to configure the dial rules when calling out from the CMS. Outbound dial plan rules can be configured via the GUI too. Outbound dial plan rules can configure whether to use a SIP proxy while dialing out or call directly. If using a SIP proxy, it configures the trunk type. Cisco Call Manager and Expressways fall under SIP trunk type. It can configure the contact domain, which is recommended when making link calls. When using call bridge groups, it can also configure if the dial plan rule should be used by one call bridge or the call bridge group or the whole CMS cluster. Dial transforms are for the outgoing calls. These work with the outbound dial plan rules to complete the whole outbound routing. Transforms means the CMS server will modify the dialed URI and then match the outbound dial plan rules with the transformed URI. For this to work, the transform activity happens before the dial plan rule check. This is done by the CMS automatically. One thing to keep in mind is that dial transforms don't work for gateway calls. So you cannot transform a gateway call. More about gateway calls in the Microsoft Interop section. As the name says, it is used to check all the incoming calls on CMS server and then do the configured actions when matched. This can also be configured from the GUI. Without any incoming dial plan rule, the CMS might not accept any calls. Incoming dial plan rules define whether the call should be routed to another CMA users or spaces or IVRs or to link conferences. Point-to-point calls are removed from WebBridge 3. When using multi-tenant environment, incoming dial plan rules can route the calls to specific tenants. Forwarding rules work for the incoming calls too. These rules act as a failover for incoming rules. If none of the incoming rules are matched, CMS will assume the call is to be forwarded and will check the forwarding rules. Major use case for forwarding rule is to rewrite the domains. You can also use these rules to identify some calls and drop them. This can act as a mini firewall for dialed URIs. A space created in CMS means a virtual conference. The same conference can happen multiple times. Each instance of the same conference is a separate call with a unique ID. Every conference in CMS is a unique ID. Multiple calls can be the same conferences that happened in different times. All active calls can be seen of the active conferences. To start a conference, a new instance of call is created for a space. Once created, the conference is active. Any participants joining this conference now becomes part of this call ID. Sometimes it is needed to create a conference manually so that the call ID can be tracked. If the admin does not start the call, a random call ID is created when the first participant dials in. Participants, as the name says, refer to all the participants for a conference or a call. This API is very similar to call leg. As you can see, there is a lot of things that can be done, and this API allows to configure all the permissions a participant has for the conference. Permissions like ability to share, etc. This API can be used to allow someone from the lobby to the meeting. Call profiles define the in-meeting experience and is also used to limit the number of participants. You can create multiple call profiles with different in-meeting experiences and apply them to different kind of conferences. Call profiles can be attached to spaces, bulk space parameter sets, participants, space templates, tenant, and system profiles. Applying a call profile in system profile means this becomes a default for all the spaces in CMS. Applying call profile for the space will have high preference over the profile configured in the system profiles. As call profiles give the ability to create conference parameters, call leg profiles give the ability to create participant parameters while in the conference. All the participants in a conference or a call are the call legs. The slide lists all that a call leg profile can set for a participant in a meeting. Call leg profile can be attached to spaces, space templates, access methods, space user, calls, system profiles, and tenant. Applying call leg profile to the system profile would mean, by default, all the participants of all the conferences in the CMS server would have similar meeting permissions. This API allows the camera control for the FECC supported endpoints. This slide shows how the layout template configuration looks like. In the example, I have added a JSON file with configurations for both single and dual screen layout design. The single and dual screen preview shows exactly how the panes would look in the layout based on the number of participants joined. DTMF profiles create the key tone combination to do all that is listed in this slide. Users are created when an LDAP import is done. As part of the import, virtual personal spaces are created for every imported user. While importing the user, configuration is made for the type of URI that will be created and which part of the LDAP info will be used for name, etc. The space template also have to be associated to the user. Only then these users can create spaces based on the space templates assigned. More than one space template can be assigned to the same user. User profiles are used to configure user permissions for space creation, ability to start a meeting, presentation sharing, etc. User profiles is where the PMP licenses are attached to the user. These are the APIs used to create call bridge groups and then add call bridges in the groups. Call bridge groups are where the load balancing related configurations are done. These APIs configure the web bridge module on CMS. Few important points here are the space entry mode, web link access, and the sign-in visibility. Space entry mode and the web link access means whether the user can join the space using a web link or via call ID or both. WebBridge can also be configured to not show the sign-in option in the home page. This would restrict the web app participants only as guests. This is not a recommendation, but just a capability if needed. This is where I can tie the web bridge to one call bridge or a call bridge group. This slide shows the relation between the profile APIs, its relation and priorities with the objects it is attached to. System profile can have global profiles for calls, call legs, call branding, IVR branding, DTMF, and user profiles. Now, if I apply a call leg profile to the call, this will have a higher priority over the one configured in the system profile. The same is for IVR branding profiles. For some objects, the profiles can be applied at multiple levels. For example, the call leg profile can be applied to the system profiles, to the space level, to the space user and access methods. In this case, the deeper we go, that profile will have higher preference than the one in the levels above. These are some of the documentation links that will be useful to understand the CMS APIs.